It's always interesting, right? When you put an ooze in your deck, depending on the list, like, do you ever consider that second one? Because you do want to draw it more often, right? If you put a tech card in your deck, you want to draw it. But with Demon Hunter, the sheer rate in which it draws cards means that you can often feel very comfortable as just running one-offs in there. But we are diving straight into game number 1, Gia. So here we go. It's the Rush Warrior on the top from Gur, and then Dizdemon with that OTK Demon Hunter. Mulligan happened almost in a flash here, Gia. Any big comments?
I definitely like holding on to double jump. That seems pretty standard already with Demon Hunter, because a lot of the time, even if you get the skull early, as long as all the cards left of it are dumpable, then you can still get the skull down for outcast value in a timely fashion. And Dizdemon is absolutely poised to be able to do that. Whereas for Gur, I definitely think Watley is a strong keep to make sure you have the resources flowing in this matchup, because I tend to find that when Rush Warrior wins the matchup, it's either by curving aggressively or making sure that their mid-game board are wave after wave, and the Demon Hunter usually only has access to one Arcanist plus Fell Scream or Immolation Aura to deal with that, and then the next wave can be too much for them.
Yeah, you can generally see the plan coming together, and if as the warrior, as Gur is now, sitting on conditioning and Watley, it's a very powerful combo that takes a bit of time to pull together, of course, but once it does, the minions are often just too big for Demon Hunter to realistically clear, so we'll see how that pays off for him so far. Does have a very slow opening outside of that, naturally the case when two of your cards are like a turn 5, turn 6 play, so we'll see if he can put on enough pressure, or if Dizdemon's going to be able to just sit back and pretty much do what he wants for the first 4 to 5 turns of the game.
That's true, although to be fair, Demon Hunter doing what they want in the early game is at best discounting Skull. It's not pressuring Gur back the other way. But for Gur, it's a little bit awkward in that the rush minions that he discovered / the tent trasher, that discount kind of conflicts with what he wants to do of turn 4 coin Watley, you'd have to imagine, so that he can then follow up with conditioning and immediately play, say, the buffed bumper card that comes off of the Watley. So the timing of this will be very difficult to parse, but I do like just throwing out the parade leader here, even though it's prone to a lot of removal from Dizdemon. You have to make them use it eventually, right? And Gur will also have to consider his own hand space once the Watley turn rolls around.
Yeah, of course. I mean, Parade Leader isn't a minion you can comfortably leave alive, right? It is an ongoing threat. So if that's soaked for some reason an I-Beam or even a Throw Glaive, I guess, like that would have been pretty high value there for Gur, because these are all cards that can't be used with Moags or Arcanists later to actually kill the big minions. So
yeah.
Oh, Gur just plays at a lightning speed, doesn't he? I mean, of course he didn't have tons of options. He's got his game plan kind of figured out, but the decision to just play ETC, to just play it, was made very, very quickly that turn.
Yeah, I think it's super reasonable, though, because there's not a lot of situations where you can actually get the burst damage from ETC all from hand, because Demon Hunter won't be playing many minions for you to rush into in most circumstances. You can sometimes hold on to ETC for like a board that you developed the previous turn. Some of them rush minions for extra damage. But if your board is sticking, you've kind of already put yourself in a really good decision. So I prefer getting the minion on board right now. Just spend your mana, force Dizdemon onto removing it, and then move along with the Watley game plan. For Gur, the only awkward part is that the Gunarg came down a little bit late, so he couldn't really weave in the Tent Trasher prior to the Watley turn. But it still could be a lot of pressure coming back the other way once this Watley comes down and the conditioning buffs the entire hand.
Yeah, and really funny decision there from Dizdemon, right, to play out the Ooze before the Moag, not the Moag, sorry, the Gunarg is actually procced. But now Gur can start to kick off the plan here. Watley gets the bumper card, gets the Alexstrasza, Mutinous, of course, and now he can just buff that massive hand. Even the Fleet Hoof is going to be gigantic because it's been corrupted.
That's true. Yeah, Fleet Hoof as a pickup is not something you often prioritize from Athletic Studies as Rush Warrior, but Gur kind of had it laid out that he knew he was going to go for early Watley and go for conditioning, and even just the singular minion is going to be very problematic for Dizdemon, who currently it looks like he's going to have to just play out his philosophy for 0 value, which is, you know, not the end of the world. It's not ideal to have no extra Moarg, but obviously his priority is getting the skull down, and this is in terms of timing, working out decently for Gur, because he can already play at least one minion from the conditioning, and I'd have to imagine that's a Tent Trasher.
Yeah, it's just clean, isn't it? You can swing into the Ooze, get a pretty reasonable trade into Kurt with the Tent Trasher, still retain 4 health, and already now the threats begin here from Gur. Dizdemon has the Skull, but look what the follow-up is. Like, especially you've got to keep an eye on that Mutinous for turn 7 to see if there's any big cards that you can snipe with that. Because also as well, what's funny is the conditioning has kind of negated the misses on Mutinous. Like if he eats an Arcanist, it's eating a good minion, but the stat gain isn't there. But with conditioning, it's still going to be a threat.
Absolutely. Honestly, even the singular Fleethoof Pearl Tusk this turn, of course, Gur would still have mana to go stage dive first, so he's going to see what's in the box. But just the Pearl Tusk, this is so problematic for Dizdemon. 10 health is far out of range of just an Arcanist and Immolation Aura. It is, however, not out of range of double Arcanist Immolation Aura, but that's a lot of resources to be used. And I think Dizdemon is forced to because he cannot leave this 10-10 around.
And this is a problem we see in Demon Hunter sometimes, right? Is you have answers, but when they're forced to use them this early, surely Dizdemon's expecting more stuff to come down. He knows there'll be a Dragon Draw. He knows there's a Pirate. He knows there's a bumper car in there. So he knows that even if he commits everything or a lot of resources to clear this board, there's just going to be wave 2. And then what, right? It's very, very difficult.
And that's why this I-Beam pickup is very relevant, because I think Dizdemon can maneuver it in such a way that maybe he only removes a singular minion and then saves some of these resources to deal with that theoretical wave 2 if Gur plays into it. But we can see it's not just wave 2, right? It's wave 3, 4, and then Alexstrasza or Mutinous, and then Dizdemon, if he doesn't immediately have lethal, is kind of dead. But for this immediate turn, we could see I-Beam with Moarg Arcanist and a Talented just to deal with the Fleethoof, but Dizdemon is going the other way around. I'm not really sure how this works out now. 1 Arcanist and Immolation and then Fellscream, maybe? That's a clear. Having to use that 0-cost Fellscream is pretty painful. Like, he could technically still face tank it, but I don't think he can afford to take that damage.
Yeah, it's...
Or not. Okay.
Is he going down? Okay. I mean, so it's reasonable, right? He isn't going to die next turn on 12 health and no board from the Warrior. And he does have Moarg Arcanist Fellscream Blast if he's about to die and he needs to heal up. So he can get some level of heal. And it's something that I've found the better Demon Hunter players do more is just let themselves be low on health, because they know at any given moment he can heal so much, you can just go like Reno all the way back up to full.
Well, that's not quite the case here, though, because he has used so many resources that the Reno is not available. But with the Smack and preserving the Fellscream Blast, what Dizdemon has done here, crucially, is give himself outs for lethal. Because if he top decks Il'gynoth next turn, he will actually have at least 18 with the Moarg Arcanist and the Fellscream Blast. It's not quite lethal just yet, but he can set it up with an Eldrazi Warblades over 2 turns. So he's given himself a window to maybe survive this turn. And importantly, he's taken board by developing this 4-4. So he's hoping that between Warblades, his next draw, and this 4-4 on board, he can survive another turn and then hopefully draw Il'gynoth for lethal. It's optimistic, but it's an out.
Yeah, it's at least a bit of a plan here from Dizdemon. Gur, though, piling on more and more pressure. Immolation Aura is there, but Dizdemon has to be aware of the timer that he's on as well, because he has to consider Alexstrasza at all times, right, with Watley being played. So he knows that once it hits turn 9, he can just take 8 to the face and there's nothing he can do about it. So he really does have to plan around that and see if he can maybe risk it and then save himself for another turn and then hope those draws come. But
right.
Ugh.
And so this might involve just Immolation and then Eldrazi to the face with the hero power, because he's technically not dead yet, right? He heals for 3 and then he knows Alex is not available yet. And even if there's a weapon from Gur, that would only be 9 damage. So it once again will give him an out for lethal with a specifically Il'gynoth top deck. Which is, not very likely. It's going to be 1 in 11 by that point. But every other play, it feels like, gives up his long-term win condition. And from Dizdemon's perspective, I don't know if he can afford to try and play around Mutinous, because that's just never going to work out for him.
Right. Looks like he's going to go for the Arcanist Fellscream Blast. Basically, at this point, I think he's just on the I need to draw Skull next turn kind of plan here, which is reasonable, right? It looks very silly to just throw so many resources down and now it feels like he can't win. But Gur's on 19, it is very doable from one Skull, right? If he gets exactly Il'gynoth and another Fell Scream.
Well, he needs a bit more than just those two pieces. Like, he'll need Philosophy as well.
Sure.
And this is the second Arcanist used, so I think he'll need Ethereal Augur Merchant. But that's not quite it. So this Demon's play definitely still reasonable because by clearing the board and healing up, he can, in some worlds, survive for more than just one turn, which means that even though you do need a Skull into a combination of cards, you give yourself 2 turns to draw it, as opposed to the other player was laying out where you give yourself 1 turn to draw exactly Il'gynoth, but that one draw could immediately win you the game. It's really difficult to figure out the ideal way to go about it for Demon Hunter. For Dizdemon, looks like he is just going to clear off as much of this as he can, and he will be alive still, even against Alexstrasza. But for Gur, even just dropping down this Mutinous, only 1 minion or 1 card in hand. If it's not a minion, then you know you're not dead the next turn, and if it is a minion, then you've eaten something very important.
Yeah, I think I like this though, right? Because there's just no way for Alexstrasza to die, realistically. At this point, you've just there's Il'gynoth as well. You've just seen so much removal. You've seen pretty much everything Dizdemon's got. Like, what could that 1 card plus the draw be that would actually threaten a 10-10? Probably just doesn't really exist in most circumstances. So good win there for Gur, but I think that game plan almost from turn 1 looked very strong, right? Watley plus conditioning is a winning combination, especially against Demon Hunter.
Yeah, right from the get-go, the Mulligan spelled it out there, and he didn't even have to use the Mutinous, which was yet another tool in his back pocket to use for disruption. And I think that the mini set has swung the matchup ever so slightly more in favor of the Rush Warrior. Prior to the mini set, I think people were still like kind of on the fence on who's actually favored there. But I do agree that as long as the Rush Warrior is able to hit conditioning and a decent amount of card draw, then they can very much force the removal pieces out of the Demon Hunter's hand, which Dizdemon had to do just to survive. You can see that if he had held on to Fell Scream Blast, there was maybe a way to get lethal with Il'gynoth, but he couldn't hold on to it because he would have just died.
Yeah, it was a very tough game, isn't it? Because it's not as if Dizdemon completely whiffed, right? He played a Skull, he had Moag, he had some removal. Yeah, well, he had a lot of removal, actually, to not die so quickly, but it just didn't fully come together. I think, really, the draw chain didn't happen, right? Like, the Skull was just into some minions and some removal. There was no, like, ongoing cycle that really happened to really dig through that deck quickly. So, rough one there for Dizdemon, but it is only game number 1. Gur now has the token druid and then the question mark deck, I guess, of that Deathrattle Demon Hunter to get a win with.
What a world we live in where it's not the token druid that's the question mark deck anymore. That's the Apex special.
Token druid's always a question deck, but because it's always has been, it doesn't really need to be mentioned anymore, I guess.
Fair enough, just like in Counter-Slow being drawn in Europe.
Exactly.
But to be fair, I think this deck is not as big of a question mark as, you know, earlier iterations where I think this newer list that has the Ace Hunter Kreen in there, not running double, Felsteel Executioner, just one-ofs of the like not ideal cards, even though there's plenty of one-ofs which might trigger people like Sottle. I think it kind of works in just how the deck wants to be built, such that if you are going to run anything that isn't part of your Deathrattle chain, you want to keep it as slim as possible to make sure that you are really getting the benefit from cards like Razorfen Beastmaster and Razor Boar to make sure that you never ever lose board, and then by the time you're able to land Talon or essentially anything on this right column of the deck, you are in such a strong position.
Yeah, there are those games where you just get hold of the goods, right? Like you're able to just chain play these massive value, like single value cards. But for me, the reason I'd say it's more of a question deck is I just honestly think because it's a fairly new archetype, it's just maybe not had the matchups fleshed out enough yet, right? And it's just not maybe not just been around long enough to really get a good feel of how it performs in some of the matchups at least. But it is going to be going up against Rush Warrior. And this is kind of a cool matchup, I think, because it's the trade-off between the potential hand value of the Demon Hunter versus Rush Warriors wanting to trade on board, but sometimes you don't want them. you don't want to trade into a Demon Hunter, right? Because they'll just be able to pull more value from the hand for free. And then it sounds a bit silly, but it effectively gives that new minion charge because or rush, I guess, because then it can attack again on the turn it's summoned. So it's going to be interesting just to see how Dizdemon approaches this Demon Hunter.
Yeah, it's certainly a very interesting matchup because of that kind of interaction you laid out. And because of that, I feel that conditioning is doubly important here because for Rush Warrior, if you are going to, say, develop a minion and not trade into the Demon Hunter's board, if your own minion is small, a lot of the time the Deathrattle Demon Hunter can just take a trade up or some value trades, and then they still end up ahead on board because their minions are generating more minions, right? But if you go conditioning, you drop, say, like a 5/7, just leave it at that. A lot of the time, the Deathrattle Demon Hunter doesn't have enough attack on board to actually kill that off, and so trading for them becomes awkward, and then you're able to just push a lot of face damage. So I feel that just the curving out game plan for Rush Warrior, while Gunarg is obviously still very, very good, and perhaps Parade Leader, if that's all that's available to you, is like a decent way to start off. It quickly tapers the effectivity of just playing out your cards on curve. It needs to hit the buffs even off of stage dive, and then just trying to build boards that the Demon Hunter cannot trade into immediately, so you can actually put on the aggression instead of making trades that are favorable for them.
Yeah, and there's also the downside with Demon Hunter, because I played a decent chunk of this deck, that, well, you don't always have the Deathrattle chain openings, right? You don't always start with the pigs automatically, so it's one of those things where sometimes you might have, like we can see now, the Razorfen Beastmaster and Renowned Performer, which seems good, but there are times where there's nothing to actually chain with the Deathrattles, but you still have to play a minion, so you do end up playing kind of just flat statted minions of a 3-mana 3/3 and knowing that nothing's going to be pulled, and that's where you kind of hope your opponent doesn't trade into it, right? So they don't get that knowledge that the hand's a little bit empty.
And that's why we're seeing from Gur the willingness to keep these two together, even though the 4-cost looks relatively expensive. It's just a guaranteed way to get value off of the Razorfen Beastmaster that he'll play. And from Dizdemon, the Mulligan I was thinking was very interesting because I definitely like the look of Gunarg and 10 Trasher when you're on the coin, because you can get down a turn 3 10 Trasher guaranteed with this type of hand. And so that kind of implies you keep Parade Leader as well for turn 2. It's only the Sword Eater that I'm not entirely sure about, because maybe that can be the follow-up to the 10 Trasher, and I guess Dizdemon's expecting that his Gunarg weapon charges might be used up by then.
And it's a fair assumption, right? Because the opening half of the Demon Hunter deck is a lot of minions that are around 3 health, right? You do want to swing into them, you do want to do the trades, because suddenly, if you have a board plus the weapon, you don't have to fear that Deathrattle chain as much, because you can clear both, which is a big deal. So yeah, I actually quite like the Sword Eater, as well as that 10 Treasure for the reasons you outlined, of course. But here, Gur gets to go with the Pig to start off with. And I love Fellsteel, by the way. I think it's such an incredible card. It surprises me that some players only want to run 1 or sometimes 0 in the Deathrattle Demon Hunter list.
I think 1 is reasonable because, again, it's another card that's not going in the N'Zoth pool nor a Deathrattle minion that you want to pull forward, but it does help with the flexibility of the deck, because a lot of, outside of that weapon, the Deathrattle Demon Hunter actually really struggles to remove minions if they're not already on board. And so for Dizdemon, while I did talk about curving out as not necessarily the way to go against Demon Hunter, if you get this curve exactly with both weapons and 10 Trasher, there's very few decks that can really outvalue all of that. He's just powering through the entire board, even with the Deathrattles. But this Fell Rattler is pretty clutch for Gur. He can take a full clear with that if he likes, alongside the hero power.
Yeah, it's just the right card for the situation, and he needed something good, right? Look at everything else in his hand. It would have looked very meager in comparison, so good response here from Gur. One of the problems he's got, though, is that Skull is potentially likely to be cast to just draw 3 cards at full cost, because with that Inquisitor on the far left, it can be a little bit tricky to pull off if Gur wants it, if he requires the card draw around that time.
Yeah, that is very true. It's kind of like Il'gynoth in this situation, just locking in the skull there. And importantly, that means that Gerd doesn't really have a ideal way of corrupting the Felsteel Executioner, although I'm not necessarily sure if he wants that as a weapon or not. I would figure it's kind of weak as a minion because Dizdemon has just replaced his weapon as a way to one-shot the Felsteel Executioner. So in some ways, the Mankrik is a welcome pickup that doesn't just die immediately to the weapon, but floating the mana is obviously not ideal.
And sometimes, although you do have to play the Felsteel in its like demon minion form, one of the problems is it make N'Zoth whiff on your Inquisitor later on by summoning the 4/3, and that's definitely what you want to avoid if possible.
Yeah, I misspoke a while ago. It does go in the N'Zoth pool, but not in the way you want.
But you don't want it to go in the N'Zoth pool. You can use it as a weapon instead. Here, though, this demon doesn't really have a great turn himself, right? He's still going to be ahead on board, and landing and sticking a Playmaker is powerful, but the follow-up doesn't look too great.
It doesn't, but it kind of has this weird interplay of, because he's not really developed super proactively, it kind of puts Gur in a position where outside of the one of I-Beam in his deck, I think he needs like 2 card combinations to get through the Playmaker, which is kind of tough to put him on having. And so his best play is to just develop a board, which I think opens up a possibility for Dizdemon to just use his Blade Master Samuro aggressively. He can try and just end the game before N'Zoth even comes into the question, and I think that's decent usage, if not one of the best for it. But this Watley now gives him an even better option.
I'm actually a little bit surprised Gur just didn't go for Skull that turn. It's obviously scary to just let the board stick, but he's kind of done that anyway. If you're letting a Playmaker live, I don't think he's expecting this taunt to stay alive, right? Because any rush minion will take it down, more than likely. But I do think that Gur could have used that turn to play Skull and try and dig for like the big turns that he actually needs, the likes of Deathspeaker, Blackthorn, maybe even N'Zoth or Talon. Just something a bit chunkier to really progress the game plan towards that Inquisitor.
I get where your head's at, but I think outside of exactly Deathspeaker Blackthorn, he would have just been dead if he took the turn to just draw with the Skull, because yes, you do pick up N'Zoth, for example, but then you're not playing it for a very, very long time. And then Dizdemon will have just pushed that minimum 6 more damage and taken another full turn to develop. So while Gur's play did not look like it was going to win him the game, I think he had to be defensive in that position and just pray that the Playmaker wasn't going to get value. And it so happens it didn't get immediate value here, and maybe that's his ticket back into this, even though he does have, less resources at the moment.
There's a pretty close draw as well, like an exact 4-drop, right, to corrupt the weapon is a really big deal, because if he whiffed there, and that was my fear, right, if that draw wasn't very good, then he has to Skull this turn, which is a whole turn later. Dizdemon has more mana and potentially better minions to play going forward. So that was a little bit of a fear, but Gur did get away with it.
And he's also kind of just opened up an aggro game plan for him now, with this weapon having 2 more swings and the Illidari Inquisitor in hand. There is a way to just try and burst his demon down without even accounting for N'Zoth or the Skull being played. He will know about the second Sword Eater in hand off of Watley, so the taunt still is a sticking point, but Illidari Inquisitor allows him to trade over the taunt and then swing face and then still get the Illidari to face, so it's pretty powerful indeed.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned when we were talking about the Felsteel earlier that it's great to be able to just pick off minions because it's high attack, but this is the other benefit, right? It just does a ton of damage. Like, you can just kill people with it, and then when you pair that with an Inquisitor, you're pushing like absurd levels of damage turn on turn.
Yeah, and that's why we see Dizdemon here. Instead of being baited by a taunt, even though he knows about the possibility of Illidari Inquisitor, he knows that the Inquisitor is not actually going to get any damage blocked because of its doubling up attack potential. And so Dizdemon sets up a counter-lethal potential here. It's not quite enough though, because it's only 17 damage plus a weapon swing, and Alex will not be available. So Gur just gonna send everything to the face. This is, I think, completely correct. However, he doesn't necessarily have a way to get through the taunt this time after Dizdemon trades into the Illidari Inquisitor.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was even looking at the potential of just Razorbar Skull that turn and hope it gives you something worthwhile. But this allows him to Skull next turn to get something for the win, right? Or at least to stabilize, to continue.
Dizdemon going to go hunting with the studies. There's some pretty good outcomes here. I think particularly Rustied Raider is actually really good here as a high health taunt, but not available. And so it's probably just going to be pick the cheapest one, go Sword Eater and Hero Power. Can he fit in Blood Boil Brute? Don't think so.
Yeah, he could just use this Razor Jaw to do the trade for him, right? Just so he can push more damage and have an easy go of setting up 2-turn. But either way, I think I would have liked the Razor Jaw, just because if it's attack, it just trades with more Demon Hunter minions, right?
Yeah, it's just cheap, which means he can fit in both Sword Eater and the Hero Power, which means that Gur needs to have the mana to get through this 2-5 and Hero Power for the lethal, which is, you know, kind of a tall order, but not in the face of a Skull.
It's tough though, right? There's not...
Couple rush minions, I guess.
Yeah, there's not that fishy flyer wouldn't quite do it. Fell Rattler doesn't quite do it. Like, it's awkward, right? You'd need a combo of 2 rush minions exactly to go through.
Yeah, and he didn't get anything cheap enough to play here, so it looks like Dizdemon has turned the corner because the Skull of Gul'dan the second one cannot be outcast, and so Gur can't play anything that comes off of it, even an I-Beam. I think that's just it.
Yeah, I'm just staring at this hand, but there's just nothing, is there? It just doesn't get there. Wow, that was a good turnaround. Obviously, Gur was piling on a ton of pressure for most of the game, but Dizdemon just about had enough to fend it off, and I think a lot of that is down to one of the drawbacks you get from playing Deathrattle Demon Hunter is when you do have that Inquisitor almost in your opening hand. Yes, it blocks Skull, which is a huge problem we know about from, say, Il'gynoth, but also it's just an 8-cost card that you don't really want to play until turn 8, maybe turn 9, depending on weapon situation, that isn't an early game card, right? Deathrattle Demon Hunter, you definitely do want that curve. You want all the Deathrattle early pressure you can get, and Gur was almost 2 cards down for a chunk of that game, as you see, with Inquisitor and Skull in hand for quite a long time.
Yeah. And this is off the back of just Dizdemon keeping what turned out to be a very smart mulligan here. I was questioning potentially the Sword Eater, but just making sure that he had that persistent weapon damage and a guaranteed way to follow up the turn 3 Tent Trasher. Even though the Sword Eater wasn't maximum pressure as a minion, it allowed him to keep pushing this incremental damage, which allowed him to set up the counter lethal and make sure that Gur had not a free turn to go and look for a way to deal with that taunt and push the lethal of his own. And we could see Dizdemon, even if he didn't necessarily have lethal that turn, let's say Gur picked up some miracle way to clear the board, then Dizdemon still had that Alex for his own face to try and survive for another turn. It was just very, very cleanly played out, and I think an example of the way you can win the matchup even without conditioning.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it was a really good play from Dizdemon. And it just said Demon Hunter for some reason, which not really what I was getting at. But one thing both players have in common now is Rush Warrior has the wins done. So we're going to move over to Dizdemon's Miracle Rogue for this one. And it looks fairly standard Gia, apart from just a couple of cards sticking out to me. The Penflinger and the inclusion of Mutinous in Rogue. And I'll be honest, not something I've seen too often being used as of yet.
Yeah, that's right. I have seen it from, a fair amount of the field. Usually it's just Vanessa that's getting cut as the first card if you are going to run Mutinous, because they're both one-ofs. The Mutinous, of course, is doesn't have that utility with Foxy Fraud or Field Contact that Vanessa does, but it is a very unique effect that allows you to get disruption against particularly OTK Demon Hunter, but even Deathrattle Demon Hunter. There's a lot of times where they're emptying their hand towards an Azoth turn or an Illidari Inquisitor turn. You play Mutinous into that and you delete an entire turn from them, and that can be very, very powerful. As for the Penflinger, we all know that if you are running that, you tend to cut one Guardian Og Merchant instead, and this often feels like more a matter of preference. I don't really hate the Penflinger inclusion whatsoever because it can give you a way to double up on Field Contact turns, whereas sometimes Og Merchant falls a little bit short.
Yeah, it's simply it's probably one of the closest things we have recently of it's just a slightly different option, right? Like one has strengths over here, one has strengths over here, so we'll see how it plays out there for Dizdemon. And I am very interested to see by the end of this weekend just what Rogue's win rate actually looks like, because it's not like you're expecting it to be banned, it's not like you're expecting for people to actually target it. It's just like bringing Rush Warrior in your lineup isn't trying to target Rogue, right? It's just Rush Warrior is a good deck. So I'm very interested to see how Rogue performs. It looks like Gur is going to be queuing up this Deathrattle Demon Hunter, and this is I think a pretty good matchup for the Rogue. I think the Rogue can actually just do things a lot faster, especially if Deathrattle Demon Hunter does not, get off to the races with those chains early on.
Yeah, it's quite close. I think if you filter ladder stats for Diamond to Legend, it does come out slightly Rogue favored, around 52-53%. In ranks overall, I think it's more like a 50-50, but I think this is definitely a matchup where skill expression from the Rogue can really shine and make the difference here for that extra percentage points, because one way that Rogue can win this matchup is by going very, very wide early. If they get Octobot and just vomit a bunch of stats on board, yes, Demon Hunter has Fell Rattler, but a lot of your minions have 2 health and not 1, and you can kind of zoo them out that way. And if not that type of win condition, there is still just the ability to utilize burst towards the late game, but that can be a little bit difficult to achieve if you have to get through survive wave after wave of Deathrattle minions in the meantime.
Okay, Gia, as the expert, I was going to ask you about mulligans, but that surprised me. I think Dizdemon's opening offering was good. I just didn't know which pieces I would have kept. Dizdemon was like, me neither, I want them all. So what do you make of this, keeping even the Tenwu?
The Tenwu is the most surprising one here, because I can definitely understand Octobot with field contact. That's the dynamic duo. And then the Swindle is a way to say you can coin Swindle and then Octobot and then field contact. It's really hard for Demon Hunter to actually one-shot the Octobot. They need exactly Fishy Flyer or the corrupted Fell Steel Executioner. Not the easiest to achieve. It's really just the Tenwu that I'm not sure where it slots into all of this.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited just to see what Dizdemon's plans are, because it's not a card you keep because, it's probably going to be good. It's like, well, there must be a plan if you're actually keeping it in your mulligan when you'd really be after maybe something a little bit more active, especially with this Octo and the field contact turn. So, let's see what happens here. Gur, on the other side, has the pig, and he has a minion to proc from it, so that's ticking some nice early game boxes. But, as you mentioned, quite difficult to actually proc or kill the Octo without proccing it. But for me, I think if I was Gur, I'd sit there and say, this is awkward, this card's always awkward, I'm just going to do my game plan and just play out the pig anyway.
That's true. Oh, okay. I think it's starting to come together. I think Dizdemon was expecting this type of play, and so what he can do now is bump the Octobot and then Tenwu, and then replay the Octobot and try to double up on that value, which means he gets an even wilder field contact turn.
Okay. I'm here for this. I'm very interested to see how good this is, because suddenly, like you said, quite difficult for this Octo to actually get killed. Especially now in a weird way. It's not as if this was a normal minion on Gur's side, you'd say, oh, we'll just trade the Tenwu and hero power this turn and then Fishy Fire. He can't, because if the pig dies, it'll pull out the Ecto, which still will proc the Octobot. So it's actually a really good, almost like checkmate setup from Dizdemon.
Yeah, this was just really cleanly done, and identifying that when you are on the coin and able to get down the Octobot turn 1 and then follow up with this style of play, Gur doesn't have access to a way to one-shot the Octobot just yet because Fishy Flyer is too expensive. Gnarg is just a little bit short of being insane here. If he had one more mana to work with, I don't know.
I mean, Glide was offered, so I'm tempted. I was recently
playable that turn.
I was recently playing Xeris' Demon Hunter with Glide, and it's pretty good actually. And I'm just thinking with the double Octo proc, is there ever a wonder of just saying, well, you know what? Maybe, just maybe, you can pull it off. But you are right. On turn 3, it's a little bit awkward to pull off, and then there are going to be more cards drawn, so suddenly the outcast effect isn't there. Still, a guy can dream. Okay.
This just works so beautifully for Dizdemon now. He got double discounts on everything. Like, there wasn't even a 1-cost card in hand to like waste a discount here. So that means the Swindle is for free, Prize Plunderer can come down. Wow, he can even Shadow Step to deal with what comes out of this Razorfin Beastmaster. Oh my goodness. Too powerful. He can Aug Merchant his Field Contact, and then Gur pretty much needs exactly Fell Rattler, or he can just go home. He's probably already home because we are playing from home here.
If he's not home, someone just check on him. But yeah, it's so strong, and you know, we were talking about that Mulligan keep, but it's paid off in spades here for Dizdemon. He's drawn so much. He's just doing the top tier rogue things.
Exactly. So again, Fell Rattler or bust here for Gur, and it looks like bust.
So, is there anything else he can do? Can Studies get him something?
Studies can get him the weapon with Outcast that deals 1 to everything. I think that's his best out. Not there though. Oh. Dizdemon absolutely destroyed Gur this game. He's not dead just yet. I think his best option is to try and draw towards Fell Rattler, which would lead me to believe Crimson Sigil Runner, because the Spectral Sight would... Well, technically it's still playable, right? Even with the Cult Neophyte, because the discount would put us back to 2.
But yeah, I agree. I think zero mana draw feels a lot better, even though it's only drawing 1 card. Oof, Inquisitor.
I'm not sure though, because like, what's he doing with the rest of the mana anyway? Like, the only cards that would use that mana are the second Razor Boar, potentially, or the Eye-Beam.
He could have got the weapon as well, the 1-cost weapon, which would have been okay.
Yeah. Tusk Piercer.
Yeah. Oh, 2 mana, Kazakus.
That's just dirty. Be looking for the 1-cost Golem here to buff everything. That would be ideal. Or you could just take the 5 and say he's almost always going to have the time to play it next turn anyway.
Yeah, he's gone +1, right?
Yeah. Missed on the good options, though.
Yeah, this is pretty rough. I was going to say he could even have done the Penflinger, right? If he got a good one. He could have actually just Penflingered the 1/1 and gone just max board buff.
But it's all first world problems, because just the fact that he stuck a Field Contact for another turn is massive. However, Dizdemon just going fishing in the first place for +1 on everything goes to show that he is thinking about the possibility of Fell Rattler as the one way that Gur might be able to come back into this.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, even Fell Rattler just doesn't do as much versus this board anymore, right?
It really doesn't, yeah.
Oh.
If it were even there, Raven.
And this is one of the problems with Deathrattle Demon Hunter. It can look incredible in some matchups, but you run so many like oddly shaped cards, like the 2 Inquisitors. Inquisitor's a strong card, right? Skull's fantastic cards, but then there's N'Zoth, there's like Alar, and a lot of these cards are so slow and clunky if you don't get the combinations off, if you don't get the good Deathrattle chain, if you don't get the Death Speaker as well to just dump out all these minions on board without you having to actually play them. And look at hands like this actually aren't that rare when you play Deathrattle Demon Hunter, and it just limits what you can do. But honestly, the core of the win there for Dizdemon was just that Mulligan, and it paying off in incredible fashion.
Yeah, we do have to stress just how much of a stroke of brilliance that was. The early Octobot with the Tenwu to get 2 discounts on it. He already knew that if that goes off, there's no way he's going to lose. But just the fact to have the confidence to play it out that way, because there are certain iterations where it completely blows up right in your face, where you coin out the Octobot, let's say Gur does nothing. He doesn't have a 2-drop, and he's saying, I have Fishy Flyer, I'm not going to Hero Power proc this, I'm going to wait. And then that completely destroys Dizdemon's game plan. But for Gur to have the read on that being the better thing to do, it's very, very difficult to expect because we already know from a lot of players' perspective when you're going up against Rogue, if you don't immediately have the kill to Octobot, you kind of tend to respect the possibility of them having Og Merchant or Penflinger to proc it themselves. And so you say, let me hero power right now so that they discount one less card in their hand. And or in other situations, you just develop your own minion, get the own game plan going. And this demon took complete advantage of that, recognizing that the Razor Boar allowed him to get double activations on the Octobot, and it was just some very, very clean rogue play. And it's just so cool to see that you're still learning new things on this deck, even though it's been out for so long.
Right, and even if Gur like took the approach of I won't play a minion, right? Then you just don't do anything till turn 4 against Rogue. Like, that's not really a situation you want to be in either, especially when you're kind of a tempo deck yourself, right? But let's dive straight into this next matchup. It's Demon Hunter once again for Gur as he tries to get this Deathrattle variant over the line. Dizdemon now only has his OTK version of Demon Hunter to take a win with, but Gur's opening hand looks much better this time round.
Definitely more amenable. Again, I'm still questioning the inclusion of Mankrik in this Demon Hunter deck because it feels like it has very little synergy. There's not that many ways of drawing card in Deathrattle Demon Hunter, and the Mankrik doesn't go in the N'Zoth pool or anything like that. It doesn't get pulled out by any of your Deathrattle effects, but it is just a way to curve out, which looks decent for Gur here because it clearly looks like a 1 into coin 3 into 3 type of hand, which I think this demon is fine even if he sees that strong curve because he'll be very under very little pressure, right? He doesn't have to clear minions until he's clearing all of them at once and gaining all the health back. So I tend to actually like the OTK Demon Hunter's chances in this matchup.
And it's a tough deck to balance, this Deathrattle Demon Hunter, because on one hand, you want this synergy, right? You want the pigs to pull out other Deathrattles from your hand, so there's like a never-ending chain. But if that happens, even if it's just a 1-for-1 like it is at this exact moment in time, well then there's no turn 3 play for Gur, which is why you still need to play some other things that aren't Deathrattle minions to be able to just cover some of those weaknesses. So I don't know. We'll see how it pans out overall, but it is a lot of pressure so far, and double Tusk Piercer means that although there isn't Skull for now, it's still a decent amount of card draw, which means Gur can keep this minion pressure going, at least in the near future.
Yeah, the card draw is very, very important here for Gur. And for Dizdemon, the awkward thing is that if he wants to get his skulls into outcast position, there's 2 very valuable board clearing tools that he would have to dump. And I did talk about how when the OTK Demon Hunter clears a board here, they can do it all at once a lot of the time, or just clear the first layer and heal up to a point where the second layer of minions that are pulled out by the Deathrattle are not immediately threatening. But if that requires you to like dump an immolation and fell scream early, then it might be a little bit difficult to expect that you actually have the answers for a Deathspeaker Blackthorn / N'Zoth turn. So I think this demon is right to just like hold off for a bit, see what he gets from the Thalnos, maybe figure out some better things to do, and wait for more resources he can delete from Gur's board before he rips the immolation or fell scream blast. Hey, that's something to do.
Yeah, not looking too bad here. Dizdemon can drop that Fell Screamer and just bank it. But yeah, that's the big question, right? And the question Dizdemon will have to deal with is, can he clear the board and use these tools such as Immolation or maybe an Arcanist and not be in trouble after the fact, right? Like, the clears need to be very, very strong to be able to stay on top of the game plan. But Double Skull could just work wonders in this game, because suddenly with Double Skull and the other Fell Scream Blast, he can clear some hand space pretty easily here.
Okay. This is really not what Dizdemon wanted to see. Like, he can I-beam just to get the Spectral Sight into outcast position, and the goal of drawing cards here might seem a bit vague because he already has Double Skull, but I do think he wants to pick up at least an Arcanist or a Moarg before he lets rip on the left-hand Fell Scream Blast, because you do want to make sure you get significant healing out of that. It is a partially dumpable card because he has another copy, but if he's dumping it for 0 value, then he might not have time to both get the Outcast Skull done and actually survive because he hasn't gotten the maximum amount of healing.
Oh, this is really tough. I think I'm a simple guy, okay? If there's Skull available on turn 6, I'm playing it no matter what, and if I can make that happen, I'm playing it. Not necessarily the right case in this scenario, but I think if Dizdemon uses the Immolation Aura and the Fell Screen Blast this turn to open up Skull for next turn, then even though he uses the resources for not enough healing, the cards he'll be able to draw with the discount will make up for that missing health.
Very possible here, but for Gur, this looks like about as clean of an Alara turn as any. The Skull timing for him is a little bit awkward, but he can still get it to Outcast position in 2 more turns.
Right.
A bit slow, but better late than never. I don't think outcasting Skull is as paramount to the Deathrattle Demon Hunter as it is for OTK.
Yep, completely agree, and honestly, although Alarm most of the time is a card you never want to play from your hand, you always want it to just come from a Death Speaker, it's probably the best timing ever to play it into a Skull turn, right? Because it's just such high attack. There need to be very specific answers to clear it off and clear off the Ashes too, so actually pretty convenient there for Gur, piling on a ton of pressure.
Alara is one of the few mid-game cards from the Deathrattle Demon Hunter that actually pressures the OTK Demon Hunter to a point where they might have to use combo pieces inefficiently. I think increments of 3 damage, not so scary, but obviously the Alara does more than twice that, and now there's just 3 7-man crit coming out as well, exacerbating Dizdemon's problems, so he really needs this next Skull to do miracles for him. Like, the Ethereal Aug Merchant as a discounted combo piece is relevant, but it's not Morg, it's not Il'gynoth, and so Dizdemon is on a very short timer here.
Yeah, and I'd really like to see from Gur just slam this Kurt, because he can activate this Fell Steel easily going forward. Okay, well, maybe he can play Fishy instead now that he's got something else. But I think activating this Fell Steel and just having upwards of 5 damage a turn is just insane against Dizdemon here. Just pile on the pressure more and more so that maybe he won't give him the time along with this Alara to actually piece together any kind of big AoE. Gur's going to go different now.
I'm on board with you for that. But I think the thinking for Gur here is that this Beastmaster, if it dies, is just insurance because it's going to pull the Fishy Flyer for him. And next turn, he still has access to Kurt plus Fell Steel Executioner. So he's not in a rush to go for Skull himself. But look at the Skull from Dizdemon. Double Moarg. But he has to use this other Fell Screen Blast to stay alive. Does he? Wait. Like, he can be alive on board just by Hero Power Swing.
Right.
But is he dead to 4 damage weapon? He'll go up to 16. Yeah, and then there'll be 13 on board plus weapon is 17. So it looks like he has to do a little bit extra here. Even if he shoots the 1/1 and swings face, he'll be dead to weapon, right?
He should be, yeah. He can't... Yeah, he will just have to heal, won't he? Or at least we can see he'll have to heal if he wants to survive, because again, the weapon just does so much damage. And Alara, again, normally a card you don't really want to just play because it's so slow against a lot of decks. It's just worked wonders against Dizdemon here.
Yeah, it's just done an insane amount of damage here. And obviously Dizdemon was not going to use his second Fell Screen Blast, even though he was aware of the possibility of him dying here. That was his best ticket for lethal of his own win condition if he had top deck Il'gynoth in the near future. Or even not just top deck, right? Just drawing it off of Fell Screen Blast because his Moargs are for free. He could basically still just get the lethal that way. But he did run that risk of dying on the backswing, and Gur absolutely had it. Very clean curve from the from the Deathrattle Demon Hunter, completely picked apart the OTK Demon Hunter and making me look stupid because I still think, I don't know, my own personal experience is that OTK is not that bad in the matchup. I have a decent win rate on ladder, but I know that the stats don't agree with me on that one.
Yeah, that's fine. Just decide that you're right. It's what I do about Hunter, so it's no problem. It's okay here. It does mean now we are going to go all the way to a game number 5 for our first match on stream of the day. Of course, there are tons of players still playing out across the board, and hopefully we'll be able to check in with some of the other matches after this one, just to give you a bit of a look at what's going on in the rest of the Swiss round. But for now, going to game 5, and Gur, I believe, only has his Token Druid left over. And now, like, what do you make of the matchup of Token Druid versus OTK Demon Hunter?
Oh, this one has gotten really close over time. I think it's somewhere around a 50-50 at the moment, because as OTK Demon Hunters have gotten better and have been like including Throwglaive as a core part of the list, like at least one copy I think has become standard here. Some people even run 2, which outside of the Token Druid matchup feels like a little bit too much, but you'd be very happy to have that in your back pocket because it's just an additional board clear. Discovering Kurtruses off of Illidari Studies is really, really useful as well. And I think that OTK Demon Hunter is no longer as completely reliant on hitting both Immolation Auras as they were before.
Yeah, there's some other slight differences they can do, right, to make up for not just relying on that card. But for me here, for Gerd on Token Druid, the resizing pouch is one that's always fun. I just love the card because there's some ridiculous things you can do with it. Gerd only running 1 though, so maybe we'll get to see it. But I think we saw yesterday, I can't remember which match it was, but it was Token Druid made a huge board, and it just so happened that there was like an exact clear, and then it was just game over. And I feel like, again, without Fungal Fortunes, that will probably be the case in this matchup too, right? Token Druid will at some point decide to say, right, here is my board, and then it's going to be pretty simple. Can Demon Hunter clear or can't it? So the game might look very one-sided, but the matchup itself is actually quite close.
It's very intricate, and this is yet another matchup where the ladder stats have it like solidly in favor of the Token Druid, but I think there is a lot of skill expression to be had from the OTK Demon Hunter as well. Just recognizing that you don't have to overreact to medium-sized boards and use your most powerful tools of Immolation Aura and Talented Arcanist unless they are actually threatening lethal from a single Arbor up. There's a lot of situations where you kind of have to make the concession as OTK Demon Hunter that like if they have exactly Bloom Solar Arbor, I'm dead, sure.
Right.
But if they don't have that, then I can like eke out my resources a little bit more greedily and survive to a turn where you can actually get the Skull, get the Il'gynoth down. And it involves running some calculated risks for sure, but I think that Dizdemon will be able to pull it through. However, the Il'gynoth in the opening hand makes matters a lot more difficult.
Yeah, we saw the Fungal Fortunes keep for Gur, which makes complete sense, of course, but interestingly enough, just going off what you talked about earlier, we saw the Throwglaive actually mulliganed away from Dizdemon. Do you think that's often the case, where Throwglaive good in the matchup, but a card you want to draw into, not necessarily a card you want to keep from turn 1?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the mulligan from OTK Demon Hunter is largely similar, where you want to keep card draw, things that get Skull, and dumpable cards to get Skull and outcast position. The only difference I would maybe note is keeping Immolation Aura compared to regular mulligans. And the Throwglaive is a card that doesn't actually get good until around 5-6 mana, I should say, because it's a bit expensive to clear entire boards, whereas Immolation Aura is good pretty much from the second you draw it.
Right. So Gur just taking a slower approach, which is often the case when you get hold of that early Fungal Fortunes, that you don't have to rush anything. You really want to just combo all these cards together. You want to be able to have access maybe to those Solars and Blooms to be able to really pop off on one single turn. So yeah, just take a bit of a slower approach. I imagine he's going to go for Fungal Fortunes number 1 now of 2 in hand. So Gur's not going to be wanting for resources this game, I imagine. Double guess the weight as well.
It's all the card draw without any of the ramp, which is, quite awkward for Gur in and of itself, because as the Token Druid, you would much rather be able to play a Glowfly with an immediate buff on the board, either with Soul of the Forest or Pride's Fury, which would involve hitting Lightning Bloom and Innervate at some point, so that you're not dead to singular Immolation Aura. You kind of want to make the Demon Hunter have to have a combination of cards, like Arcanist plus Immolation Aura, for example, and if you can avoid it, you'd rather not just be dead to a singular card. But it looks like Gur might not have a choice in the matter. Leading up to that turn, though, it looks like this could just be a Thorn Growth type turn. I don't think he has the hand space to really go for more Guess the Waits.
Yeah, maybe it's suddenly Gur that's playing the what cards can I dump from my hand game plan here, as opposed to the OTK Demon Hunter we're used to seeing from. But yeah, I guess so. Oh, okay. Gur is going to go guess. What's the mana?
Know if he wants to draw even more.
Yeah, he might have guessed the one that gives him the highest chance of losing it, if you want to phrase it as losing the draw, just to keep up some hand space. That makes sense. Just going to hero power away that Thanos and just keep the board nice and clean and remove that spell damage, because again, in this matchup, the spell damage minions combined with the AoE can be absolutely huge and make all the difference.
Yeah, I think Gur did something pretty smart there where he did go for the wrong guess, and in the disaster scenario where he gets the right guess, he can still dump the Thorn Growth at worst, but he's prioritizing getting the Thalnos off the board while still drawing, because he's really looking for Lightning Bloom at the moment, for Innervate even, just to make sure that he can get to Glowfly plus buff a turn sooner than usual. I don't think it'll be unreasonable for him to just play out solo Glowfly next turn if nothing presents itself as an option, though, because you can just kind of say sometimes, if you don't have the Immolation or the Throglaive, I just win here.
Double Chaos Strike. Gonna come down. Dizdemon just didn't really have a lot of other options at that point. He probably would have liked to play Raging Fell Screamer, but that was the first draw from the Chaos Strike, so did not have the mana. Here comes the Glowfly, and now Gur gets to almost peer into Dizdemon's hand a little bit in terms of how he responds to this.
Yeah, this is real awkward for Dizdemon, having hit neither of the Immolations or the Throglaive. He can still go digging with Illidari for cheap card draw to try and hit Immolation Aura, or even Skull is playable here, and if it immediately discounts Immolation, then you can do that. If he hits Kurtrus, that's like reasonable to clear off like half of this board along with the weapon swing. Okay, there's a Skull. Coin that out, look for the aura. If he doesn't hit it, then yikes, but if he does, then we do have a real game in our hands. Oh, yeah. Oh, wait. Okay. He can still clear 4 minions. It's expensive, but I think he has to.
Yeah, well, I was going to mention before the Skull, of course, that there was the choice of just using an Arcanist Fellscream Blast. It seems extreme, but also in this matchup, I think it's fine because you can afford to just, as long as the board's empty, you're just never going to lose the game, right? So, you're going to hold?
I don't think you can afford to. I think, like, use resources like that, because it means that against the next refill, he would still have to go digging, and he would use a lot of combo pieces in the meantime. So in terms of calculated risks, Dizdemon is taking an even bigger one than I expected, which is just leaving as much of this on board as possible. But he is just kind of saying, if you don't have exactly Innervate/Bloom plus the Solar Arbor, then I'm alive. And then I get to have an even bigger swing with more Talented and Fellscream Blast, but it's a bit optimistic. Wait, does he just have lethal? Oh yeah, he does. This is 36.
I'm going to take your word for it. I'll be honest, I didn't count because I was working out how he clears the board and what he does there, but...
Or you have to count again. It's double Arcanist, not double Morg, so I think it's 30 exactly? Yeah.
And just like that, when we were thinking, when we were all about to start, chanting tree, it just ended the other way. Dizdemon takes the win almost out of nowhere at that point, and rewarded greatly for the hold and for the risk, I guess, of saying, okay, I'll kill 1 minion, that increases the odds of me not dying by X%, I'll hold, and then we'll kill him. And it paid off, and you know what? That sort of risk taking, you can choose how if you like risk or not, but that and the rogue Mulligan keep has just continued to impress me here for Dizdemon. I think he's played very well in this series, and it was extremely close, but those choices just gave him the wins. It's pretty incredible, honestly.
Yeah, this is exactly what I was talking about in terms of calculated risks. Granted, I was tunnel visioned on just, taking the calculated risk to survive for 1 more turn, so he gets a full board clear and a swing. Just so happened that this time the calculated risk was to give him time for just the lethal, because Il'gynoth was that early in his hand, and he got all these combo pieces discounted by the Skull. But the